Level 1. Private. You're 19. The letter is on the kitchen table and your mother won't open it. Start at the bottom. Basic training taught you to stop thinking because hesitation kills faster than enemy fire. You're issued a rifle and a helmet that never quite fits on 3 shillings a day. You own nothing, and when the whistle blows, you go first. Privates suffered the highest casualty rates in the infantry, not from recklessness, but from geography. Someone has to be first through the hedgerow to draw the fire. Nobody asks your opinion, nobody explains the plan. You are handed a direction and a distance, and the reasoning behind it lives 3 ranks above your head, in a briefing you will never sit in on. Your entire war is reduced to the width of a trench, the weight of your pack, and the man breathing next to you, because he, not the general 30 miles away, is the one who will actually keep you alive tonight. Cold is not weather to you, it's an enemy that never signs a truce. Fear is not a feeling you're permitted to name out loud, so it becomes something you carry silently, folded into your kit alongside spare socks and a photograph you look at when no one's watching. You learn the sound of incoming before your brain consciously registers it, a kind of animal fluency bought at the cost of everything gentle you used to be. This is the base of the pyramid. Every rank above you exists, in the end, because of what happens to men exactly like you, in exactly this position. Level 2. Corporals survive long enough to earn 2 stripes, and 8 to 10 men now move because you tell them to. You still share the same mud and rations, but every choice you make about which house to clear or which ditch offers cover determines who comes home. This is the strangest promotion in the entire army, because almost nothing about your physical circumstances changes. You still eat cold rations from a tin. You still sleep in the same waterlogged holes. You still bleed exactly as easily as the private beside you. What changes is invisible and enormous. You are now legally and morally responsible for other human beings while remaining just as exposed to the same shells they are. A corporal doesn't get a desk or distance, he gets a section, a handful of frightened teenagers who now look to him in the 3 seconds between an order arriving and a bullet arriving. You're a private with a leadership problem bolted on top of a survival problem, and there's no additional pay, comfort, or safety that comes with it. Only the crushing knowledge that a wrong call at a crossroads costs someone else their life, not just your own. It's often said that corporals win or lose small wars, 10 yards at a time, 1 hedgerow, 1 house, 1 riverbank at a time, and nobody back home will ever know their names. Level 3. Sergeant. You don't plan the war, you run it. You manage the physical reality of the platoon, handing out ammunition, enforcing discipline, and translating an officer's abstract plan into something 40 terrified men can actually survive. Officers command, but sergeants run the army. Picture the job stripped of glamour. You are the quartermaster, the disciplinarian, the translator, and the shock absorber all at once. An officer, often barely out of school, hands down an order that sounds clean on paper. Advance and take the ridge by 0600. It is the sergeant who turns that sentence into reality, who makes sure there's enough ammunition in every pouch, who knows which private hasn't slept in 3 days and is about to make a fatal mistake, who quietly reshuffles the order of march because he trusts one man's instincts over another's rank. Sergeants are the institutional memory of the army, the ones who've survived enough engagements to know which textbook tactics get people killed. Officers often deferred to them not out of formality, but out of pure self-preservation, because a green lieutenant who ignored his sergeant's advice rarely lasted long enough to learn from the mistake. It's a rank built entirely on earned trust rather than birth, education, or class, which, in the rigid hierarchy of the British Army, made the sergeant's mess one of the few places where competence alone determined your standing. Level 4. Second Lieutenant fresh out of officer school. You outrank every veteran under your command while knowing less than all of them. You carry a pistol instead of a rifle, not because it's practical, but because it serves as an intentional target marker for enemy snipers. British doctrine demands you lead from the front, making your rank a target by design. This is the rank with the grimmest statistical distinction in the entire Army. Junior officers alongside privates had the shortest life expectancy of anyone on the line. Not because they were reckless, but because the entire culture around them insisted on visible, personal courage as proof of legitimacy. A 21-year-old second lieutenant, months removed from a classroom, is expected to be first over the top, whistle in hand, in front of sergeants who have survived years of combat he hasn't yet witnessed. He carries a different silhouette than his men, a pistol on his hip instead of a slung rifle, sometimes a swagger stick, sometimes insignia that practically paints a target on his shoulder for enemy marksmen trained specifically to hunt officers first and cripple the chain of command. And beneath the surface, bravado is often a quiet, desperate reliance on the sergeant standing next to him, the unspoken deal that the map knowledge is his, but the survival knowledge belongs to the man with the stripes. Some of the best officers in the war were the ones humble enough to recognize this trade immediately. Level 5. Captain and Major. The ground slips away as your life becomes tethered to a signaler's radio. You are coordinating artillery and managing company-wide pushes, standing at the crucial hinge point between direct frontline combat and tactical command. Somewhere between lieutenant and major, the war changes shape entirely. You stop measuring distance in yards you personally walk and start measuring it in map coordinates you relay to someone else. A captain commanding a company of roughly 100 men is no longer fighting a war of individual survival. He's fighting a war of resource allocation, timing, and coordination, juggling 3 or 4 platoons that are each having their own separate brutal experience of the same afternoon. The radio becomes an extension of his own nervous system. Static isn't background noise, it's the sound of information, or silence, about whether men are alive. A major, commanding several companies, drifts even further from the mud, spending as much time with maps spread across a jeep bonnet as he does anywhere near a rifle. And yet this is not safety. Shells don't check rank before they land, and a well-placed artillery strike on a company headquarters could erase an entire tier of leadership in a single moment. This is the rank where the war stops being personal and starts being logistical, and that shift, for many officers, was its own kind of psychological weight. Level 6. Lieutenant Colonel, you leave the dirt behind entirely, commanding up to 1,000 men from a farmhouse basement or a hillside dugout. Your war arrives as radio static and muddy runners. You issue the order that sends a company forward, and then you sit in the heavy, agonizing silence of waiting for the report. At this level, command becomes an exercise in trust and imagination, rather than direct observation. You cannot see the ridge your men are dying on. You can only picture it from a map and a handful of crackling radio reports. A lieutenant colonel commanding a battalion of close to 1,000 souls spends the moments after giving an order in a peculiar kind of purgatory. The decision is made, the men are moving, and there is absolutely nothing left to do but wait for confirmation that living, breathing human beings did or didn't survive the choice made on their behalf. Runners caked in mud arrive with scraps of information hours old. Maps get annotated with pencil marks that represent abstractly entire platoons pinned down under fire. It is often described by those who held the rank as one of the loneliest positions in the army, responsible for the fate of 1,000 men, yet physically incapable of doing a single thing to protect any one of them in the moment it matters most. Courage here isn't charging a machine gun nest, it's making a decision and then living with the silence afterward. Levels 7 to 9. Brigadier, Major General, Lieutenant General. The battlefield vanishes. You are no longer moving squads across a field. You are shifting divisions of 15,000 troops on a map board. Gunfire is replaced by distant operations rooms, and casualties arrive hours later as cold numbers typed onto summary reports. A brigadier oversees several battalions, thousands of men he will likely never personally meet, let alone lead by name. War at this altitude becomes an exercise in abstraction. Supply chains, troop rotations, ammunition stockpiles, the coordination of tanks with infantry, with artillery, with air support, an enormous three-dimensional puzzle, where every piece is somebody's son. Move up to Major General, commanding a full division of roughly 15,000 troops, and the transformation is nearly complete. The war is now fought primarily on paper, in operations rooms lit by electric lamps rather than gunfire, where casualty figures arrive as typed summaries rather than screams. A lieutenant general commanding a corps of multiple divisions is negotiating with other generals over which sector gets reinforcements and which gets sacrificed for strategic gain. Decisions made with a kind of cold, necessary detachment that would be psychologically impossible to sustain while also standing in a trench. These are the architects of catastrophe and triumph alike, men whose signatures on a single order can determine whether 10,000 soldiers advance into a slaughter or a decisive breakthrough, and who will, in most cases, never once hear the sound their decision made when it landed. Level 10. The General. At the very summit sits someone like Bernard Montgomery, directing campaigns from a mobile command caravan, briefing prime ministers, and appearing in newsreels. You shape the strategic direction of an entire war, yet you will never once fire a shot in anger. Here, at the absolute top of the pyramid, the war has transformed into something almost unrecognizable from where we started at that kitchen table. A general's battlefield is a map table the size of a room, covered in painted counters representing entire armies. His enemies are other generals. His weapons are timing and deception, and the husbanding of resources across an entire theater of operations. He briefs prime ministers in oak-paneled rooms, appears in newsreels projected in cinemas back home, and shapes the destiny of a war through decisions made with a fountain pen rather than a rifle. And yet, the terrible irony sits underneath all of it. Every strategic masterstroke, every celebrated campaign is built entirely from the currency of privates and corporals bleeding in ditches he will never personally see. He commands the war in its totality while experiencing none of its immediate horror, the polar opposite end of the exact same conflict being fought in that same hour by the 19-year-old we started with. Oteron Dikino's conclusion. Lay all 9, no, all 10 of those experiences side by side and a stark truth emerges. The lower your rank, the more direct your danger and the less control you had over survival. The higher your rank, the more weight rested on your decisions, and the further you stood from the violence those choices unleashed. It's tempting to imagine this as a simple hierarchy. Private at the bottom suffering, general at the top comfortable. But that misses something more unsettling. Each rank carried its own unique, specific torment. The private's fear was immediate and physical. The sergeant's was the fear of a wrong call getting his men killed. The junior officer's was the terror of being watched, tested, and doubted while pretending to be certain. The colonel's was the agony of silence after giving an order. And the general's, perhaps the strangest of all, was the fear of history itself, of being the name attached to a catastrophe that cost thousands of lives, discussed in classrooms for a century afterward. No rank was truly safe from suffering. The suffering simply changed shape as you climbed. The private in the ditch and the general reading a map 30 miles away were fighting the exact same war on the exact same afternoon, yet experiencing realities completely unrecognizable to one another. One measured his war in inches of mud and seconds of survival. The other measured his in miles of front line and days of strategic consequence. Both were, in their own way, terrified. Both were, in their own way, responsible for lives beyond their own. So when you picture World War II, don't picture one war. Picture 10 distinct wars running simultaneously, stacked on top of each other by rank alone, each one real, each one brutal in its own specific way, each one utterly invisible to the ranks above and below it. And somewhere back at that kitchen table, a mother is still staring at a letter that never told her which one of those 10 wars her son was about to walk into.